Emma Hartley was 29 years old and, by all external measures, lived a life most would envy. Her friends often remarked on her perfectly curated Instagram feed. Snapshots of sun-drenched brunches, candid laughs at wine bars, vacations framed against sparkling oceans and city skylines. To anyone scrolling past, Emma had it all. A successful career in marketing at one of the city's top firms, a charming fiancé named Daniel, and an apartment in a neighborhood where the streets were lined with trees older than the buildings. But if you peeled back the layers of filters and clever captions, there were cracks barely hidden beneath the surface. Emma's mornings began with the soft glow of her alarm clock at 6 a.m. sharp. She would rise quietly, careful not to disturb Daniel, who often came to bed late. Too late for someone who claimed he had early meetings the next day. In the half-darkness, she would dress in sleek workout clothes and jog the same 2-mile loop around the park near their apartment. It was her ritual, her time to organize her thoughts and silence the questions that sometimes bubbled too close to the surface. On one particular morning, a thin mist clung to the grass, and the air smelled of damp earth and autumn leaves. Emma pulled her hoodie tighter around her and ran, her feet pounding a steady rhythm on the pavement. She thought about the upcoming gala at the firm, about her next big campaign pitch, about whether Daniel would remember to RSVP. When she returned, flushed and energized, Daniel was still asleep, or at least lying in bed with his back to her. Scrolling mindlessly on his phone, Emma lingered at the door, watching him. There was a time when mornings meant shared smiles, and coffee sipped shoulder to shoulder at the kitchen counter. Now, mornings were separate islands. She shook off the sadness, telling herself it was normal. Every couple settles into routines. The initial spark gives way to comfort. At least, that's what she kept hearing. But the feeling that she was trying to convince herself nagged at her. Later, as she prepared for work, Daniel leaned in the bathroom doorway, still in his pajamas, coffee cup in hand. "Big day?" he asked casually. Emma forced a smile. "Every day's a big day," she said, applying her mascara with a practiced hand. Daniel chuckled, but the sound didn't reach his eyes. "Try not to conquer the world without me," he joked, setting his cup down and disappearing into the living room. Emma stared at her reflection. Her makeup was flawless, her hair smooth, her outfit impeccably chosen. She looked exactly like the woman who had it all. So why did she feel so empty? The drive to work was uneventful, the city alive with its usual weekday bustle. Emma listened to a podcast, something light and humorous, but her mind kept drifting. She parked, took the elevator to the 15th floor, and stepped into the familiar hum of office life. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, snippets of conversation floating above cubicles. "Emma!" a voice called. It was Sarah, her closest colleague, and perhaps the only person Emma trusted implicitly. "Big pitch today," Sarah teased, falling into step beside her. "Is it that obvious?" Emma laughed. "Grateful for the distraction. Only to those who know you." Sarah winked. They reached Emma's office, and as Emma set down her bag, she caught sight of a framed photo on her desk. It was of her and Daniel, taken on their last vacation. A week in Bali, all smiles and sun-kissed skin. She remembered that trip well. The laughter, the long dinners by the beach, and the way Daniel's phone never seemed to leave his hand. Emma shook her head, chasing the memory away. "Focus!" The pitch went flawlessly. Emma had always been good at her job. Strategic, creative, composed under pressure. Her clients loved her boss respected her, and her team admired her. She was, by every definition, a success. By the end of the day, she was buoyed by the victory. She texted Daniel a simple message. "Great news. The pitch was a success. Let's celebrate tonight. She didn't expect a quick reply. Daniel was notoriously bad at texting, but when minutes turned to hours with no response, the excitement in her chest dimmed. Emma told herself he was busy. Meetings ran late, traffic, anything. When she arrived home, the apartment was dark. There was a note on the counter, "Late meeting. Don't wait up. Love you." She stared at the words, neat and impersonal. Emma poured herself a glass of wine and sat on the balcony. The city spread out before her, glittering and alive. Somewhere out there, Daniel was... Where exactly? The perfect picture she had built, the career, the relationship, the life, suddenly felt like a painting hung slightly askew. She took a sip of wine, the bitterness of it filling her mouth, and wondered for the first time in a long while, was she really happy? Was this truly the life she wanted? Or just the one she'd been taught to want? As the night deepened and the city lights blurred into a soft haze, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something important was shifting, something she couldn't name yet, but would soon be impossible to ignore. What she didn't know was that the first emission, the first small crack, was just the beginning. The perfect picture was about to shatter. The next morning dawned grey and heavy, the kind of sky that made the entire city feel sluggish. Emma woke alone, the space beside her in the bed, untouched, cool. She brushed her hand over the smooth sheets and sighed. Daniel's note from the previous night still sat crumpled on her dresser. A silent accusation she couldn't ignore. She made her way to the kitchen, the silence of the apartment pressing in around her. No sounds of a shower running. No whiff of freshly brewed coffee. Just emptiness. Emma brewed her own coffee, staring out the window as she waited. The streets below bustled with life, the city indifferent to her growing unease. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She lunged for it, heart quickening. A text from Daniel. Had to leave early. Big client meeting. Dinner tonight. Emma typed back quickly. Sure. Let's talk later. The 3 bouncing dots appeared, signaling he was typing, then vanished. Emma set the phone down, the unease settling heavier. Work offered only a temporary distraction. Her mind wandered as she sat in meetings, nodded through presentations, answered emails. By the time she returned home that evening, she was wound tight. Daniel was already there, lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, babe," he said. Emma forced a smile. "Hey, how was your day?" "Busy," he said, shrugging. "You know how it is." She nodded, setting down her bag. "Dinner?" she asked. "Actually, I'm pretty wiped. Mind if we order in?" Emma bit her tongue. She wanted to argue, to insist they go out like normal couples did, to have an actual conversation instead of eating takeout in front of the TV. But she swallowed the words. "Sure," she said. They ordered pizza. They watched a mindless comedy. Daniel laughed at all the right moments, but Emma felt his distance. She noticed the way he angled his phone away from her as he typed. She caught the furtive glances at the screen. She wanted to ask, wanted to demand the truth. Instead, she stayed silent. That night, lying beside Daniel in the dark, Emma stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. A million questions, a million doubts. But when she opened her mouth, no words came. Silence, she thought. Silence keeps the peace. But the first emission had already planted its seed, and soon it would grow roots too deep to ignore. Days slipped into weeks, and Emma found herself trapped in a cycle that felt both numbing and strangely comforting. There was no confrontation, no explosion of truth, just small, almost imperceptible shifts. The way Daniel would linger too long on his phone, the way he seemed distracted, even when he was physically present. Emma convinced herself it was normal. Relationships change, right? People get comfortable. Besides, they were both busy. She had her job, her friends, her carefully curated life. Daniel had, well, he had his work too. They still went out sometimes, still posted pictures together, smiling for the camera. Each photograph was a brick in the facade they both seemed determined to maintain. To the outside world, nothing had changed, but Emma felt it, the widening gulf between them. It was subtle at first, a missed call here, a vague excuse there. She started noticing how Daniel always seemed to have an out, a meeting that ran late, a client dinner, an early morning conference call. He was always busy, always just out of reach. Emma told herself she was overthinking it. She'd always had a tendency to overanalyze. Sarah teased her about it constantly. "You're the queen of reading too much into things," Sarah would laugh. But there was something different this time, a heaviness she couldn't shake. One evening, while Daniel was supposedly working late, Emma found herself scrolling through old photos. Their trip to Bali, their first apartment, birthdays, anniversaries, moments frozen in time. Proof that once they had been happy. She stared at one photo in particular. The two of them on a boat, Daniel's arm around her, both of them laughing, sun-drenched and carefree. Had it all been real, or had she been so determined to build the perfect life that she'd ignored the cracks forming beneath the surface? Her phone buzzed. "Running late. Don't wait up." Emma stared at the message. No explanation, no apology. She set the phone down and stood up, pacing the living room. Her mind raced with questions she was too afraid to voice. Was he cheating? Was he lying? Was she imagining things? The doubts gnawed at her, but each time she opened her mouth to speak, to demand answers, fear held her back. What if she was wrong? What if confronting him made everything worse? And so, she stayed silent. Instead of confrontation, Emma buried herself in work. She stayed late at the office, volunteered for new projects, filled her calendar with dinners and events. She smiled. She laughed. She lived the life she'd worked so hard to build. But inside, she was unraveling. The uneasy peace between her and Daniel stretched thin, but neither of them seemed willing to break it. They were like two actors in a play long past its prime, reciting lines out of habit, pretending the audience couldn't see the cracks in the set. And Emma, ever the perfectionist, clung to the script, because if she acknowledged the truth, she'd have to face everything she'd tried so hard to avoid. She'd have to admit that the life she'd built was a house of cards, one breath away from collapse. And deep down, she knew the fall was coming. It was only a matter of time. It was a Thursday evening, the kind of night when the city's hum feels like a lullaby. Emma had just finished another grueling day at work, her mind still buzzing with deadlines and client demands. She stepped into her apartment, kicked off her heels, and allowed herself a moment to breathe. Daniel wasn't home. Again. She tossed her bag on the couch and moved to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. She sipped it slowly, staring out the window at the blurred lights of the city. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A low, insistent vibration. A number she didn't recognize flashed on the screen. Emma hesitated. Normally she would have ignored it, but something, an instinct perhaps, made her pick it up. A single text message. "You deserve the truth." Emma's heart stuttered. She stared at the words, her mind racing. Who would send something like that? A wrong number? A prank? Or something else? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She wanted to respond, to demand answers, but fear rooted her in place. Instead, she set the phone down and backed away. As if distance could protect her from the implication, the message sat there, glowing in the dim light. "You deserve the truth." The words echoed in her mind. She tried to shake it off, focusing on making dinner, flipping through television channels aimlessly. But her mind kept drifting back to the message. Whose truth? When Daniel finally came home, he was all smiles and charm, kissing her on the cheek, as if nothing was amiss. "Long day?" he asked, loosening his tie. "The usual," Emma replied, forcing a smile. She wanted to ask him outright, wanted to thrust the phone in his face and demand he explain. But the words died in her throat. Instead, she watched him move through their home with practiced ease, noting the small signs she had trained herself to ignore. The way he guarded his phone, the way he changed the subject when she asked about his day. Emma's mind churned all night. Who had sent that message? What were they trying to tell her? Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, she felt the weight of it pressing down on her. The uneasy peace she had clung to was slipping through her fingers. Silence had been her shield, but now it felt like a trap. And Emma realized maybe she didn't want to be protected anymore. Maybe it was time to know, whatever the cost. The next few days passed in a blur. Emma found herself unable to focus on work, on friends, even on herself. The message burned in her mind, unrelenting. On Saturday morning, she sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee growing cold between her hands. The apartment was quiet. Daniel had left early for a golf with clients, an explanation that should have sounded reasonable, but instead gnawed at her. The phone sat on the table beside her. She stared at it, and then, almost without thinking, she picked it up and dialed the unknown number. It rang twice before going to voicemail. Emma didn't leave a message. She set the phone down, her pulse hammering. Whoever had sent the text wasn't answering. Emma could have let it go. She could have chosen ignorance, but something inside her, a whisper, a warning, urged her to dig deeper. She started simple. Passwords. Daniel wasn't careful. He used variations of the same few passwords for everything. Birthdays, pet names, predictable combination. Emma knew them all. With trembling fingers, she opened Daniel's laptop. Sitting closed, but not shut down on the coffee table. The password field blinked at her. She typed in the name of Daniel's first dog, followed by his birth year. The screen unlocked. Emma sat frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the invasion, the betrayal, hers and his. She navigated to his email, inbox, hundreds of messages. Most looked innocuous, work-related, newsletters, the usual spam, but she knew what to look for. She typed a search: dinner, hotel, love. The results filtered in. Emails to a name she didn't recognize. Messages filled with casual affection, secret plans, can't wait to see you, same room as last time. You looked amazing last night. Emma felt the ground shift beneath her. The trapdoor had opened. She clicked deeper. Hotel confirmations, dinners booked under fake names, trips coinciding with Daniel's business travel. It wasn't just one affair, it was a pattern. A life hidden alongside the one he shared with her. Emma sat back. The breath knocked from her lungs. She closed the laptop gently, almost reverently, as if the machine had become a sacred object, the keeper of ugly truths. She felt hollow, but beneath the numbness, anger stirred, not just at Daniel, at herself, for not seeing, for not asking, for being so determined to preserve the perfect picture that she had ignored the cracks. She had been standing on a trapdoor the whole time, and now she was falling. The next morning, Emma sat at the breakfast table, staring at Daniel as he sipped his coffee, scrolling aimlessly through his phone. She wanted to scream, wanted to ask, who is she? How long? Why? But instead, she bit her tongue. The sharp metallic taste of restraint bitter on her tongue. Daniel looked up briefly and smiled. A practiced hollow expression that made Emma's skin crawl. Big plans for today? He asked. like nothing had shifted. She forced herself to shake her head. "Just errands," she said, voice flat. He nodded, seemingly satisfied. Emma stood, grabbing her keys. "See you later," she said, avoiding his gaze. "Love you," Daniel called after her, too casually. Emma didn't answer. She stepped into the brisk morning air, the chill biting through her sweater. She walked aimlessly for a while, trying to gather her thoughts, the city around her a blur. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the erosion of trust. The way it hollowed everything out, leaving only a fragile shell behind. Emma found herself outside a cafe and ducked in, ordering a coffee she didn't want. She needed to think, needed to plan, because she wouldn't pretend anymore. The fractures in their relationship were too deep to ignore. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through the messages again. The evidence of Daniel's lies staring back at her. One name kept appearing. Olivia. Emma's stomach churned. She typed the name into a search engine. Too many results. She narrowed it, adding Daniel's company, their city, and there she was. A LinkedIn profile. A woman with a bright smile. A professional headshot. And a list of impressive credentials. Emma studied the photo. Olivia was beautiful in a way that was effortless, polished, confident. Everything Emma felt she no longer was. Her chest tightened, but then another emotion surged. Resolve. She wouldn't be the victim, not this time. Emma saved Olivia's photo to her phone, feeling a strange, detached calm settle over her. She wasn't sure what she was going to do yet, but for the first time in a long time, she felt something close to control. The fractures were there, visible now, and she was done pretending they weren't. The following days unfolded with the uneasy tension of a storm, brewing just beyond the horizon. Emma found herself hyper-aware of Daniel's every move. The way he lingered in the doorway when taking calls. How quickly he flipped his laptop closed when she entered the room. The casual but constant tapping away on his phone. She observed everything, storing it in the vault of her mind, stacking evidence she no longer needed. She knew the truth now. She had seen enough. Still, she kept up appearances. She smiled when required. She laughed at the appropriate moments. She played the role she had spent years perfecting. But beneath the surface, the ground shifted, unstable and cracking. She was no longer clinging to hope. She was waiting for the right moment to act. One evening, Daniel mentioned he had another client dinner. "Late one," he said, avoiding her gaze as he adjusted his tie. Emma nodded, schooling her features into neutrality. "Of course," she said. Daniel leaned down to kiss her on the cheek, but she tilted her head at the last second, pretending not to notice the awkward miss. "Don't wait up," he said, grabbing his coat. "I won't," she replied, watching him leave with a calmness she didn't feel. As soon as the door clicked shut, Emma sprang into action. She pulled out the file she'd been compiling. Screenshots of messages, hotel confirmations, emails, a paper trail of deception. She needed more proof, more certainty. Opening her laptop, she logged into a tracking service she had reluctantly purchased a subscription for. It felt wrong, invasive. But then she thought of all the wrongs Daniel had committed. She entered his license plate number, the last known location popping up on the map. Not the restaurant he claimed, but a boutique hotel across town. Her stomach twisted, but she forced herself to stay focused. She dressed quickly, pulling on dark jeans, a simple sweater, and tying her hair back. No confrontation yet, just confirmation. The drive was short. The city lights blurred past her windshield, but Emma barely noticed. Her hands were steady on the wheel. When she arrived, she parked down the street and watched. Minutes passed, then an hour, and then she saw them. Daniel exiting the hotel lobby, laughing, his hand resting on the small of a woman's back. Olivia. She recognized her immediately from the LinkedIn photo. They stood under the awning, waiting for a car. Olivia leaned into Daniel, whispering something that made him grin. Emma's chest constricted, but she held her ground, snapping photos with her phone. Not because she needed more proof, but because she needed to remember this moment, the exact instant, the life she thought she had unraveled completely. When their car arrived, Daniel opened the door for Olivia, gallant and practiced, and they slipped inside. Emma sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, feeling the weight of the gathering storm settle around her. She could confront him, could cry, demand answers. But she didn't want apologies. She wanted truth. And she wanted an ending, on her terms. The morning after Emma witnessed Daniel and Olivia together, she awoke with a clarity she hadn't felt in months. She lay still, staring at the ceiling, letting the silence of the apartment settle over her like a shroud. It wasn't just about one lie. It was about layers of them, stacked one atop another, woven into the fabric of their life together. Emma slid out of bed and padded softly to the kitchen. She brewed coffee, the familiar routine grounding her, and sat at the kitchen table, opening her laptop. She wasn't just going to confront Daniel. She was going to dismantle the life they had built, brick by brick. She started compiling everything. The screenshots, the hotel receipts, the car tracking logs. She organized them chronologically, piecing together the timeline of deceit, emails, texts, social media posts, all the small insidious lies she had ignored for too long. Mid-morning, her phone buzzed. Daniel, heading to the office. See you tonight. Emma didn't reply. Instead, she continued her research. The more she dug, the more she found. Not just Olivia. There were others. Different names, different faces. Each a thread in the tangled web of Daniel's double life. Emma sat back, stunned by the sheer scale of it. How had she missed it all? But she knew the answer. She hadn't missed it. She had chosen not to see. Chosen silence over confrontation. Peace over truth. No more. Emma closed her laptop and stood, feeling the weight of her decision settle over her shoulders. She would confront Daniel, but not with accusations or tears. She would show him the truth, layer by layer, and then she would walk away. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't anger, it's clarity. The day Emma chose for the confrontation arrived cloaked in ordinary moments. A crisp morning, a steady hum of traffic, a sunlit kitchen. Daniel left early, claiming another round of client meetings. Emma stayed behind, her plan unfolding quietly. She spent the morning laying out the evidence, printouts, screenshots, a meticulously curated timeline. By afternoon, she had transformed their dining table into an exhibition of betrayal. Every lie catalogued, every secret exposed. When Daniel texted her in the late afternoon, home by 6, take out tonight, Emma simply replied, sure. She didn't want to fight. She wanted clarity. 6 o'clock came quickly. Daniel strolled through the door, briefcase in hand, jacket slung casually over his shoulder. He looked relaxed, unworried, the mask still perfectly in place. Hey babe, he called, kicking off his shoes. Emma didn't answer. She sat at the dining table, hands folded in front of her, the documents arrayed like a chessboard between them. Daniel's smile faltered when he saw her. What's all this? He asked, setting his briefcase down. Emma gestured to the table. Sit. He hesitated. Emma. Sit, she repeated, her voice calm but unyielding. Daniel sat. Emma slid the first printout across the table, a screenshot of a hotel reservation. Recognize this? Daniel blinked, his face a carefully arranged mask of confusion. I don't know what this is. Emma smiled, a small cold smile. Don't lie, she said, pulling forward another sheet. A photo of him with Olivia outside the hotel. Daniel's jaw tightened. Emma? Save it. She slid more papers across. Emails, texts, photos. Layer by layer. Lie by lie. Daniel's composure cracked with each new piece of evidence. When she was finished, Emma leaned back, watching him squirm. How long? She asked, her voice still calm. Daniel rubbed his face. It's not what you think. Emma laughed, a sound sharp and humorless. It's exactly what I think. She stood, gathering the papers. I'm not going to yell or cry or beg, she said. I just wanted you to see that I know. Daniel opened his mouth, but Emma held up a hand. Don't, she said. It's over. She turned and walked away, leaving Daniel staring at the ruins of his carefully constructed lies. For the first time in months, Emma felt light. The weight of silence had been lifted, and in its place, clarity. Emma didn't look back. She stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her with a finality that echoed down the corridor. The late evening air was cool against her skin, a sharp contrast to the heavy heat she had left behind in the apartment. She exhaled, slow and steady. The confrontation hadn't given her the closure she thought she wanted, but it had given her something better, freedom. She walked without destination, her steps light but sure. For the first time in months, the weight she carried was gone. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Daniel. She didn't answer. She wouldn't answer. Instead, she walked until she found herself at the small park near her apartment. She sat on a bench beneath a flickering street lamp, staring up at the night sky. It was strange, she thought, how betrayal could hollow you out and yet leave you feeling somehow fuller, full of resolve, full of possibilities. Her phone buzzed again, a text this time. Emma turned the phone over, face down on the bench. She didn't owe him anything. Not explanation, not forgiveness, not another second of her time. She sat there for a long time, letting the stillness wash over her, letting the enormity of what she had done, what she had chosen, settle in her bones. It wasn't just about ending things with Daniel. It was about reclaiming herself, her life, her voice. She stood, slipping her phone into her pocket, and walked back to the apartment with steady steps. Daniel was gone when she returned. The dining table was still covered in evidence, a testament to the lies he could no longer deny. Emma packed a suitcase that night. Only the essentials. Only what mattered. She didn't cry, didn't rage. She simply folded the pieces of her life she wanted to keep and left the rest behind. By morning, she was gone. A new chapter waiting to be written, and this time, she would be the one holding the pen. Emma woke to the soft, pale light of a new morning, streaming through the thin curtains of her hotel room. It wasn't luxurious, just a small, clean place she had booked at the last minute, but it felt like freedom. Her suitcase sat neatly at the foot of the bed, half unpacked, a symbolic halfway point between the life she had left and the one she was about to build. She stretched, feeling the stiffness in her body ease, and allowed herself a small smile. No more pretending, no more waiting for someone else to decide her fate. She was free. Emma pulled out her laptop and opened a blank document. The cursor blinked at her, a silent invitation. She thought about everything she had endured. The lies, the silence, the slow erosion of trust. She began to type. Words flowed, tentative at first, then with increasing speed. She wrote about betrayal, about finding strength in solitude, about the price of silence and the freedom that comes with breaking it. Hours slipped away unnoticed. By noon, she had the skeleton of an essay. Maybe it would be a blog post, maybe more. She didn't know yet, but she knew one thing. She wanted to tell her story, not for revenge, not for sympathy, but because she had something to say. and for the first time in a long time, she believed her voice mattered. Emma closed her laptop, feeling a weight lift from her chest. She wasn't just leaving Daniel behind. She was leaving behind the version of herself that had tolerated less than she deserved. She dressed quickly, pulling on jeans and a soft sweater, and headed out into the city. There was a coffee shop on the corner, small and unassuming, with a handwritten sign that said, "Fresh starts served daily." Emma smiled. She ordered a coffee, found a seat by the window, and pulled out a notebook. She made a list, not of goals or plans, of things she had forgotten she loved. Reading for hours, long walks with no destination, cooking elaborate meals just for herself, traveling, laughing until her stomach hurt. She filled the page, the list growing longer with each passing minute. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning, a map of new roads, and Emma was finally ready to travel them, on her terms. In the weeks that followed, Emma built a life from the ground up. It wasn't glamorous or extraordinary. It wasn't filled with grand gestures or sweeping changes. It was simple, and it was hers. She found a small apartment on the other side of the city, a modest one-bedroom with creaky floors and a view of the park. She painted the walls herself, choosing soft, calming colors. She hung up art that made her smile and filled the shelves with books she loved. Each piece of furniture she chose was a rebellion against her old life. Nothing picked to impress or to fit someone else's aesthetic, only what felt like home. Emma settled into a new routine. Morning runs in the park, afternoons spent writing, evenings with a glass of wine and a good book. She found herself again in the quiet moments, in the small victories, like fixing a leaky faucet or cooking a meal that turned out just right. The essay she had started grew into a series. She published them online under a pseudonym at first, unsure if she was ready to attach her name to her vulnerability. But the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from strangers who saw themselves in her words. People who had stayed silent too long. People who had finally found the courage to speak. Emma realized her story wasn't just hers. It was universal. One evening, as she sipped her wine and scrolled through the messages, she paused on one in particular. "Thank you for reminding me that it's okay to start over." Emma smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. Starting over wasn't easy. It was messy and uncertain, but it was also beautiful. A garden growing from scorched earth. Seeds of change, taking root in places she once thought barren. Emma closed her laptop and stepped out onto her tiny balcony, breathing in the crisp night air. Below, the city buzzed and hummed, indifferent and alive. Above, the stars blinked quietly, steady and sure. Emma stood there a long time, feeling the world shift around her, feeling herself shift with it. She wasn't who she had been, and she wasn't yet who she would become. But for the first time, she was okay with not knowing, because some journeys aren't about the destination. They're about the courage it takes to begin. And Emma had finally, bravely, begun. The days began to string together, no longer marked by the milestones of survival, but by the rhythms of living. Emma found joy in the details, the scent of coffee in the morning, the crisp pages of a new book, the way sunlight filtered through her apartment in the late afternoon. There were moments of doubt, of course. There were nights when she woke tangled in sheets, heart pounding, a phantom ache from her past life. Times when loneliness pressed against her ribs, insistent and sharp. But she learned not to fear those moments. They were reminders of how far she had come. One evening, while scrolling through her emails, she found a message from a small publishing house. They had read her essays. They wanted more. Emma sat stunned, reading the email twice, 3 times, before the words fully sank in. They wanted her story, her voice. They believed in the power of her truth. She replied, trying to sound calm and professional. Even as her hands shook with excitement, days turned into weeks of back-and-forth communication, proposals, contracts, discussions. Emma found herself immersed in the process. Each step, another layer of the old Emma shedding away, revealing someone braver underneath. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. She finished her manuscript on a rainy Tuesday, the kind of day that once would have left her melancholy. But now, it felt cleansing, a washing away of old hurts. When she typed the last sentence, she sat back, staring at the blinking cursor, feeling a quiet pride bloom in her chest. This was her story. Unvarnished, unapologetic, unbroken. Emma closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, listening to the rain tapping against the window. The city outside continued its relentless pulse, indifferent to her transformation. But Emma knew she was no longer the woman who had tolerated silence. She was the woman who had found her voice, and she wasn't afraid to use it. Not anymore. Emma's story didn't end with the final period of her manuscript. It was only the beginning. The small publishing house offered her a deal, modest but fair. She signed it with a sense of triumph, feeling the final tether to her old life snap. When her book was announced, she received messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Some were kind, congratulating her. Others were less so, their messages tinged with resentment, disbelief. But Emma didn't dwell on them. For the first time, she didn't measure her worth by anyone else's expectations. The day her first copies arrived, she sat on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by boxes, running her hands over the glossy covers, her name, her words, her truth. She flipped through the pages, feeling the weight of them, literal and metaphorical. It wasn't just a book. It was proof that you can rebuild from ruins. Proof that you can find strength in the ashes. A local bookstore invited her to do a reading. Emma almost declined. The thought of standing in front of strangers, exposing the most vulnerable parts of herself, was terrifying. But she said yes. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because she was. The night of the event, she stood behind the podium, her heart hammering against her ribs. The room was full. Friends, strangers, even a few familiar faces from her past. Emma opened her book and began to read. Her voice wavered at first, but as she spoke, it steadied. She read about betrayal, about silence, about finding her voice. When she finished, the room was silent for a beat. And then, applause. Not polite or perfunctory, genuine. Emma smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes. After the event, people lined up to speak with her. They thanked her for her honesty, for her bravery, for giving voice to the pain they had never been able to name. Emma listened, humbled and grateful. She wasn't just telling her story. She was helping others tell theirs. As she walked home that night, the city buzzing quietly around her, Emma realized something profound. Freedom wasn't a destination. It was a journey. And she was finally, truly, on her way. Months passed, and Emma's life continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Her book gained traction, slowly at first, then more rapidly, as word of mouth spread. Invitations came to speak, to teach, to share her experience with others who were still trapped in their own silences. Emma accepted what felt right and declined what didn't. She trusted her instincts now, trusted herself. One crisp autumn afternoon, she sat at her usual spot by the window of her favorite coffee shop. Notebook open, pen in hand. The book tour was over. The applause had faded, and now she faced the next question. What comes after? She thought about the girl she used to be, the one who had mistaken endurance for strength, silence for peace. She wasn't that girl anymore. She was new, someone still becoming. Emma flipped to a fresh page in her notebook and wrote 2 words at the top, New Beginning. She didn't know exactly what this next chapter would look like, but she knew she would write it herself, boldly, honestly, unapologetically. As she penned the first lines, a sense of calm washed over her. The past would always be a part of her, a shadow that sometimes followed, but it didn't define her. It never had. She smiled, tapped her pen against the page, and leaned back in her chair. Outside, the world moved forward. Cars honking, people laughing, leaves tumbling in the wind, and Emma moved forward with it. Because life wasn't about the chapters already written. It was about the ones still waiting to be lived. And Emma was ready, more than ready. She was finally free. The end.